Okay. Welcome to the MHS Young Dems Online Ohio 4 Congressional Candidates Forum. I'm Chandler White, the president of the Marysville High School Young Democrats, and today I'm joined with our advisor, Mr. Shear, as well as two of our three congressional candidates, Shannon Freshour of Marysville, Ohio, and Mike Larson of Plain City. Jeffrey Seitz, our third candidate, couldn't join us today due to work commitments. I have a statement from him I will read on his behalf. I apologize for not being here, but I'm currently employed at an auto parts company in Findlay, Ohio, where I'm an assistant manager of logistics for the past 6 years. I'm a single father of a 16-year-old daughter. She attends Bath High School, which is the same high school I attended. I served our country in the U.S. Army for 3 years as a military policeman and unit armorer. While I'm committed to this race for Congress, I have to acknowledge that I also made commitments to my employer and my family. Each of the Democratic candidates in this race believe in the Democratic platform. We have all been on the same stage and have basically agreed with each other on general ideas. What we don't agree on is how we will implement these policies. If any of them try to backtrack on this statement, you may email me at info@sitesforcongress.com. We have a lot of moderates and independents in this district. No Democrat can win without them. We've seen this in previous congressional races in the Ohio 4th. We need to build a coalition with them and the progressives that bring everyone together. Those independent and moderate voters are going to support me because I'm a working guy like them, and I'll be a voice for the needs of people like us. They know I'm talking about our healthcare costs, our housing, our decent jobs. I'm not just repeating some talking point, I'm talking about problems I've dealt with. They may not always agree with me, but they'll trust me and I'll fight for them. So go check out www.sitesforcongress.com. Watch my videos on Facebook, and when you fill out your absentee ballot, remember, vote for Jeffrey A. Seitz. Okay, so now we're going to go into our introductions of the candidates that are joining us and just some general information on our forum. It'll be made up of questions for the general public and constituents of Ohio 4 to be well informed on each of our candidates and to be able to see who's best fit to take on Jim Jordan this November. We're going to be going in alphabetical order to start. So Shannon, you will get the first introduction. You're going to be given 2 minutes to start. So whenever you're ready.
I am honored to be here. I know this is from my family has always, or at least all of my nieces are Marysville Public Schools students or have been. My niece, my oldest niece was a graduate of Marysville High. So I'm, especially honored to be here. I can literally, as Chandler can attest, stand in my driveway and see the school from across the street. Yeah, literally, I can sit out on my back patio and listen to the football games. Because now that we've got the new stadium, the sound system is so good. I can literally sit on my back patio and listen to the games. But I am honored to be here. I know how hard it is to be a Democrat in a non-really strong Democratic area. So I wanted to make sure that I could come and support you guys. I am so proud that you have started this group. As Chandler knows, I adore him. I am so proud of you guys. And whatever you need help with, let me know. I literally, as I said, live across the street. So, and if you want information, and if you're 18, it is critically important that you vote. If you're 17 and you are registered to get your absentee ballot, get your absentee ballot and voting. For everyone else who's going to watch this on YouTube, it is critically important that you immediately request your absentee ballot if you haven't voted. And make sure, and this is something that hasn't really been promoted, is that your absentee ballot must be postmarked by the 27th, not the 28th. If it's not postmarked by the 27th, it will not be counted. If you don't get it postmarked by the 27th, you still can deliver it to your local board of election by the 28th. But if you're mailing it, it has to be postmarked by the 27th, which means that you have to have it in the mail by whatever time the mail deems that postmark.
Okay, thank you. So Mike, it is your turn for your introduction statement. You can start.
All right, well, thank you, Chandler and Mr. Scherer for putting this on. We appreciate it. It's good to see Shannon again. Jeff, if you watch the tape, we've had a great race. We've had, God, a dozen of these joint appearances probably, and I, for one, think it's the best way for voters to choose a candidate, especially when we're all Democrats. It's you get to judge apples to apples when you see us on a platform together. So thank you, Chandler. Thank you, Marysville Young Dems. Thank you for even having a Young Dems chapter. I was president of my Young Dems chapter when I was in high school and college, and we did a lot of good work then, and many of them have gone on to serve in public office themselves. So thank you very much. So I'm running for this seat because I disagree with what Jeff said about needing to appeal to independents and moderates in order to win in this district. And I'm basing that on actual knowledge. I worked very closely with Janet Garrett, who ran against Jim Jordan the last 3 times. And Janet was an excellent candidate, but pulled the punches on quite a few progressive issues that I thought really hurt her with Democratic voters, especially with progressive voters. Things like saying wouldn't support Nancy Pelosi, for instance, which I thought was not only a tactical mistake, but just absolutely wrong. Nancy Pelosi is the highest elected Democratic woman in American history. And God bless us that we have her at the head of our party. And I've found running this race that the more I talk to progressive issues, honestly, more and more Democrats come out and say, thank God someone is doing that here in the 4th. Sherrod Brown has done it statewide for Senate. We saw 2 years ago that he was the only successful candidate. So I'm in the race because we'll get to experience and qualifications later, but I'm running as a true progressive, and I believe we can unite progressives to beat Jim Jordan in November.
Okay, thank you. So to start off our actual questioning, we're going to start with something that is on everyone's mind constantly and as a big issue facing our country now. So obviously we have a global pandemic with the coronavirus, and we're going to start in reverse order. So Mike, you're going to get a minute and a half to respond.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
What is your stance on the Ohio primary being moved from May 17th to April 28th by absentee ballot by Governor Mike DeWine and Dr. Amy Action? And how does the movement of the primary affect how you campaign?
Well, obviously it's affected the way we campaign because we're talking to you through a computer.
Yeah.
The minute we realized that we could not go out and knock on doors, and in fact, it was the weekend before the regularly scheduled election, and we had a massive canvassing operation ready to go, just ordered thousands of new pieces of literature, and it hurt. And I will say, I was one of the people pushing back for a minute until I realized what we had to do. And so I immediately started doing this Facebook Live broadcast every night since, where I've been able to reach out to voters, and that's at least given me a way to reach out to people. As far as the election being canceled, I think Governor DeWine and Dr. Acton operated on the best information they had. Nobody wanted to see people get sick because they were exercising their right to vote. I think Governor DeWine, a guy I am on the opposite side of politically, but I think he's done an admirable job. He's proven that he's a good person and a real leader, unlike our leadership in Washington. The only place I find fault in it was with the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, who could have mailed a ballot to every Ohioan who hadn't yet voted, but instead he chose to initiate this cumbersome process where you get a postcard and then you call or you sign up for a request, and then you send the request and then you get your ballot. So that's my only complaint with them. I hope it doesn't drive down turnout, but it is what it is. And if people haven't voted, they should jump through the hoops and vote.
Yeah. Okay, same question to you, Shannon. Would you like it repeated?
No. It's basically about where we are. I think that given the circumstances, they tried to do the best that they could. They failed in a lot of ways. And what I mean by that is, by LaRose's own admission, he realized that at about 8 a.m. when the polls opened on Monday. Now, understand there was early voting up and through the month prior to the election. So on Saturday afternoon, around that time, Governor DeWine announced that they were closing all of the bars and restaurants because it wasn't safe. Mm-hmm. They did not close or announce that there would be any. They kept saying the polling places will be safe. The polling places will be safe. They said that, including up to, they started doing social distancing on that Monday. But they still had thousands of people show up at election sites because they didn't want to go vote on Tuesday because they didn't think it would be safe. LaRose says he found out about 8 a.m. on Monday morning that it wasn't safe, that the demographics had changed so much that it needed to be moved. He did nothing with that information publicly until 3 p.m. after early voting had ended at 2 p.m. So all of the people who risked their lives to early vote on that Monday didn't get the benefit of the government. He announced it at 3 p.m. He then announced that they were filing a lawsuit at around 5 p.m. The lawsuit came back. The judge said, I don't have the authority to issue this for a statewide. I can only work for the county. He said, you didn't provide any medical information to justify why we had to do this. And so I'm not moving the election. LaRose then sent a letter to every board of elections saying, the court ruled in our favor. Send everyone home. We're not having an election tomorrow. And then what happened was the court ruled, or I'm sorry, not the court. Amy Acton then decided to close the polling places. The election was never moved. The primary is still March 17th. And that caused an enormous amount of constitutional problems for me. Because for us in a congressional race, we have what's called Federal Election Commission filings. So we were for over a week, had no idea if we were using primary money, general money, what we were raising money for, where we could use the money, what we had to notify the courts, or to notify the federal government. But more than that, people didn't know when they were supposed to vote. Was the election, the lawsuit that was filed the next day by a gentleman who said, Amy Acton and Mike DeWine had no authority to move the polling date, and they didn't move the polling date. They just simply closed the polling locations. The ODP, which is the Ohio Democratic Party, stepped in and filed a lawsuit to say, no, that's going to disenfranchise a lot of people. What we want is April 28th, which will give people enough time, and they're allowed to then have all vote by. For a week, nobody had any idea. LaRose had said from his time that he wanted it to be in person June 2nd, early voting up until that point. That's what he put on the official Ohio Secretary of State website, that it was going to be June 2nd. The problem with that is Frank LaRose had no authority to do that. That's absolutely incorrect information. He gave false information from his official website. We're still combating that people think it's June 2nd. So then the state legislature, who are very, very Republican, came back when they came into session, and they decided that they were going to take the Ohio Democratic Party's plan and institute that into law. That was what the new plan was. The primary date was not moved. The primary date is still March 17th. They simply extended the deadline for people to get absentee ballots. When Mike said that LaRose instituted this thing where they couldn't get ballots to people, they sent the postcard. The reason that they did that is actually because in a primary, you have to request which ballot you want. Just send the ballot, because there is no ballot. It's also against state law to do that. You can't just send ballots. That's where the Ohio Revised Code says that.
Well, we've gone over a little bit on that, but the reason they let us do that is because of the fact that I think it's important that constituents understand like all the, what everything that happens.
Oh, I give this speech all the time to explain it to people. All the time.
Yeah. Now our next question is still about the pandemic, and it also starts with Mike again. So we obviously all agree that obviously the people in charge of Ohio did not handle it the best, but they, the Secretary of State had messed up the situation, and the governor and them tried to handle it with the best of the knowledge they had. So Mike, what steps should we be taking to flatten the curve and bring an end to this pandemic? And are the steps that our state is taking currently enough?
Okay, and just that clarification, it's like 90 seconds you want us to keep it to, is that right?
That's what we're trying to keep it to, yeah.
No, that's fine.
Certain stuff like, Shannon giving that, like I want to, if it goes over a little bit, that's fine.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I'll just time it myself, because I know it's hard for you guys to do it all together. So I think overall we're doing the right thing to flatten the curve, and you can see it is flattening. Obviously, staying at home. Adequate information was great. Knowing not to be around older people or people with compromised immune systems was very important. I think right now, the bigger problems is the president playing politics by doing things like cutting off the World Health Organization in the middle of a global pandemic for no medical reason. The only reason was because the chief of the WHO criticized the president. So now he's going to pull money during a global pandemic, which is ridiculous. Complaining that the United States spends more money than anyone else. Well, of course we do. We're the richest nation in the world. We used to stand for these things. We used to fight for things like global health. And, you know, Trump's chief apologist, Jim Jordan, is right there with him. And it just shows us what happens when we elect people who want to blow up the government. Guess what? They blow up the government. So I think our public health officials have been doing a great job under very difficult circumstances. So have the governors for the most part. We have to continue what we're doing, use common sense so we don't affect other people. But we need to make clear the problem is in Washington, and we need to replace people like Jim Jordan and Donald Trump, or none of this is ever going to be fixed.
Okay, thank you. So Shannon, same question to you.
Well, I think that Governor DeWine has been very, very good. Dr. Amy Acton has been very, very good. One of the things, they started this very early. It sort of, for me, it became real, like, okay, this is going to be a really big thing when Governor DeWine acted to limit the amount of people who could attend the Arnold, which is our, you know, huge fundraising tourist thing in January, or in March, when people come in for one of the World Bodybuilding Classic. And so when he was like, nope, nobody comes in unless you've got a kid, and you can, if you're a parent, you can watch your kid. If you're a participant or if you're a referee, no one else goes in. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a thing. And the fact that he took that so early and sort of set the tone, and he went through, okay, this is what needs to happen next. And they went down the line. And that's one of the reasons that the election for me was so mishandled, because they knew all of these things. They had hit it so many times, they'd gotten it right. The one time they got it wrong, they got it really wrong. Mm-hmm. And so that for me is a really big thing. But what we need to do is make sure that we're protecting our state's ability to have independence. You know, we're in a weird time where you've got conservative Republicans who are demanding the federal government control everything, and liberal Democrats going, states' rights exist. Those are a thing that still needs to exist. Mm-hmm. But that's where we are right now. Yeah. We're very lucky. Our governor, the governor of Kentucky, the governor of, California, of New York, of very specific places have been very good. But there are very bad governors who are doing very bad things.
Okay, so we have to move on to our next question.
Yeah, so.
Shannon, this question goes to you first.
Sure.
So, besides the global pandemic, what are the biggest issues affecting our district, and what change can you bring to Washington to solve them?
Well, I think that the thing is that the global pandemic sort of touches all of the big things. It touches healthcare. It touches access to healthcare. It touches affordability of access. It touches the fact that we have a lot of people who, quote unquote, are employed, but they're underemployed. They're not making nearly enough to survive on. But now they've been deemed essential employees, and they're risking their lives so that the people who are more well-paid and who have always sort of looked down on them are relying on them to survive. We need to make sure that we are fighting for those people. If you look at what Jordan did, Jordan voted against the only coronavirus vote that had an actual recorded vote. He is actively demanding that people go back to work immediately. He said, and I quote, this is in a town hall here, in days or weeks, but not months. And if you look at someone like Tim Ryan, who came out today with a plan that will allow people to get $2,000 a month while the economy is closed down, so that people have a cushion to survive on. And it's those kind of things. It's replacing people who don't care about the country and who don't care about the citizens and the people in this country, but only care about money. And that's how we can change. Even just changing that one person will have a ripple effect, because he has so much ingrained power within the Republican Party. I mean, I have Republicans coming up to me going, you got to beat him. We hate him.
Yeah, okay. All great points. Thank you. So, Mike, the same question for you.
So the biggest issue outside the pandemic, although the pandemic obviously is driving this issue even stronger, right now in our district, we have got to get broadband internet to these kids in the district. Every child in Ohio was sent home to do online learning, and approximately 50% of the kids in this district, in the Ohio 4th District, have serious problems even logging in, especially if you have more than one device going on in the house, which most do because mom and dad are home from work, you've got brothers and sisters. Education is already unequal in this country. My daughter goes to a excellent school district, gets a great education, but just a couple miles away is a failing school district. Now combine that with my daughter getting great internet and some other kids just a few miles away not getting on at all, and it's really going to exacerbate the problem. And fortunately, there's a direct way of fixing that, and that's putting me in Congress. Jim Jordan refuses to fight for federal funding for broadband expansion, even though there is a program in the Department of Agriculture right now that allows you to do it. All he has to do is ask. Other Republicans in Ohio have these programs in their districts. We don't, because Jim Jordan hates the federal government. And right now, children are suffering directly at the hand of Jim Jordan, and fortunately, we can fix that this time around.
Okay. So our next question, does Trump have the authority to force governors to reopen their states and economies? Is the economy more important than the general health? And that goes to Janet first.
He does not. The Constitution is very clear on that. The 10th Amendment is exceptionally clear on that. And the person who has most made that argument through this entire pandemic has been Donald Trump. His whole reason for not issuing a nationwide shutdown was that's the governor's call. But what was the second half of the question?
The second half was, is the economy
about people and lives. No. What is an economy if it's not people? Like, it's the foundation of keeping people and their livelihood. You know, it's called a livelihood because it keeps you alive. And that's where that's really important. We have a lot of Republicans who have 100% voting pro-life record who are very clear, like, well, people have to die to open the government or to open the economy. So, well, my stock portfolio is more important than those people's lives. And that's where we are right now. So a lot of people are showing who they are and what they actually believe and what they value. And the absolute most important thing is the health and welfare and safety of our people. How we get there is we all come together. I literally had to go to Kroger this morning for the first time in, a week because I didn't have any food. But, 90% of the people there are wearing masks and, wearing gloves, and they're social distancing because we understand that we're all in this together. As trite and as cliched as that sounds, it's true. And if you look around, you can see it happening. And people understand that people are more important than money.
Okay, same question to you, Mike.
The first one was, does Trump have the authority, right? Yeah. King Trump would. Fortunately, we don't do those. And most of us know it. The guy who loves the Constitution more than anyone, Donald Trump, evidently doesn't know that. I do appreciate how quickly he backtracked, though, after saying that he had ultimate authority. And it takes a lot to get him to backtrack. It's kind of like turning around a aircraft carrier, getting Donald Trump to make a turn to another direction. But obviously the economy is important, but the economy is a living, breathing thing. It's working whether or not it's up or down. So of course we want to get people back to work when it is safe for them to go back to work. And I'm looking forward to a time when we have antibody tests and we can find out who is safe to be out, and little by little we can start the economy going in those sectors. This idea that you flip a switch and we all run outside and start hugging each other again, though, is ridiculous. My daughter is a nurse practitioner. She has her own practice. She's on the front lines. She tests people for coronavirus every day. She has 3 little kids at home. It scares the hell out of her. And she just had her wages cut because the hospital was losing money. And it just shows you what happens when we have a healthcare system driven by profit. So hopefully we'll get to that issue later and I can talk about it a little more. But we have to, one, honor the people who are out there working, the grocery workers. Jeff, who's evidently was essential, had to work at his job. And I tip my hat to the people who are working for us, even while we're stuck at home watching Netflix.
Okay, so this is our last question about the pandemic before we move into more general questions. And this is something that's very dear to me. That's why I added it last minute. So my parents work at Honda, both of them, and they have both been sent home. And so have like as of today, actually right before we started this debate, Honda laid off all the rest of the workers, so there's no one working at Honda now. So with more and more people losing their jobs every single day, where are we supposed to go from here? Mike, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, well, hopefully they will have those jobs back when we get out of this. And, but that's hope. Obviously, it would be worse if they were on an assembly line with a bunch of infected people. So hopefully we come back from this. The $1,200 that being sent out to people was a nice start, but it is literally a pittance. It's not going to go very far. And I think we are going to need action in Congress, not only to make sure those people like your parents get help in the event that Honda does not bring them all back and make them whole again, but also for things like hazard pay for healthcare workers. So it is going to require a succession of federal legislation in order to get us out of this once we are able to get out of it health-wise, and certainly having an anti-government zealot like Jim Jordan in Congress is not the answer. We need people who actually know how to legislate and want to legislate and appreciate that the federal government can have a positive role in society as well.
Okay, thank you. So Shannon, same question to you.
Well, living in Marysville, I understand how important Honda is to our community. It is our community.
Mhm.
I was really worried when Trump was having the tariff wars, because they were saying that we have parts for 5 days, and after 5 days, all of the automotive plants in Ohio or in America would shut down. That means Honda would go basically where we are right now. And it is a terrifying thought for my neighborhood, for my neighbors, all of whom work at Honda. But what we need to do is I think the plan so far of what I've read of it is, and I quoted it earlier, is Tim Ryan's plan, which he announced today, which is a $2,000 a month, basically almost a UBI, so that people have a basic income coming in to survive this, to pay for their mortgage payments, to pay for their insurance payment, their car insurance. And luckily, things like car insurance are coming down, but people are also losing their health insurance when they lose their jobs. And that's a really, really bad time to be losing your health insurance. So we need to be making sure that we are protecting people's access to the basic necessities of their life: food, shelter, healthcare. And that's what's missing in all of this. And we've got Democrats who are desperately trying to figure out ways to do it. You've got some Republicans who want to do this. And then you've got Republicans like Jordan, like Trump, like the new chief of staff, who's Jordan's best friend. Those people don't want to see Americans succeed. They want there to be punishment for believing that people should be taken care of. And that's really where it's going to come from. And so we need every vote has to be, even if you're not happy with the person who's running, they weren't your first choice, up, because there's a much bigger threat right now.
Okay, thank you. So now we're past the pandemic questions, and we're going to go into more general and stuff with the campaign. So this next question is going to go Shannon first. It's very broad. What in your life and in your experiences has made you the most qualified and best fit to be a member of Congress?
I don't know that anyone is, quote, qualified to be a member of Congress because it's a representative body. But the things that I would bring are, I have both an academic and a personal understanding of how the government works. I have a master's degree in American government, specializing in congressional and federal policymaking. I've interned and staffed Capitol Hill. I've worked, for trade associations and things like that. I understand policy from a nuts and bolts perspective. But also I understand that these policies have real life potential. I was one of the first Head Start kids in Ohio. When I was born, my mom was on welfare. And, she worked really hard, and she got training programs to help her move her off welfare and to move our family off welfare. And those are the things that are really, really important to me. Making sure that those policies, and we can see how important policies like that are, the social safety net policies are so important. As you can see right now, those are the things that I've spent my life studying, that I've spent my life working on, and that I've spent my life living. And those are what I think that I can bring to representing the people of the 4th District.
Okay, thank you. Mike, same question to you.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege in my life to have 2 careers that kind of ran simultaneously. One was as a television writer, producer, and the other was working in progressive Democratic politics. In fact, while I was writing for shows like Ellen and Real Time with Bill Maher, I was also writing speeches for Democratic politicians like Alan Cranston and Tom Harkin and Senator Ted Kennedy. But my biggest opportunity came in 2008 when one of my close friends and my daughter's godmother, Jackie Spear, was elected to Congress in a special election. And she asked my wife and I if we would sell our home and move to DC to run her office, and we did. And during that time, if you remember 2008, we got there just before Obama was elected, but we were there for the banking collapse and, you know, the rescuing of the auto industry and Dodd-Frank. And I really got a hands-on approach, not only on how to legislate and why it's important to legislate, but most importantly, because I was her communications director, my job was taking these very complex principles or bills like Dodd-Frank and the Affordable Care Act and explaining them to constituents in easy to understand terms. And I think that is a big part of being a congressperson. And I am absolutely sure that I'll be able to do the job on day one, which is why I have members of Congress supporting me.
Okay, thank you. So our next question, this race has obviously been, unique and everything with 3 Democratic candidates when the past 3 times we've had the same candidate. And then also we have an independent candidate this time around who was a former Republican chairman of, I don't remember which county. But,
Shelby.
Thank you, Shelby County, which is very just impressive to see a former Republican try to take on Jordan this way. So starting with you, Mike, what difference does this independent candidate such as Chris Gibbs make in this race, and is his presence in this campaign a benefit, or is it the opposite to your campaign?
Oh, it makes all the difference in the world. It like I've often said, the Republicans drew this district in a way that Democrats didn't have a chance in hell of winning. And now, because of Jordan's unpopularity and because there's a second right-wing Republican on the ballot in November, we have a shot in hell. Now, we only have that shot, though, if we have someone who can actually stand toe-to-toe with Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan is very bad on politics, but he's very good at public speaking. He's on television all of the time. He knows how to argue. He's a little bulldog the way he fights. And I am the best person to face him on stage. In fact, Janet Garrett, who ran against him last time, I actually played the part of Jim Jordan in her debate prep to get her ready for it. And she complained at first that I was too tough in training, but then after the first debate, she said, "Oh man, you should have been tougher. That guy's an ass." So I have years of experience, not only coaching candidates and how to debating myself, thousands and thousands of hours of television experience. Plus I have experience on Capitol Hill, which Gibbs does not have. And Jordan, I cannot wait to take Jordan to task on things like the Second Amendment and healthcare and money for education. So I am spoiling for the fight in November.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, same question to you.
Well, I think that people understand how important this election is, which is, I think, in a way different than every other election. Jordan has become a lightning rod in a way that he's always been like this, but he's now a national lightning rod. And so that's allowing people, for me to be able to fundraise off of it, to be able to fight him. He has a huge war chest, but that war chest is being spent not in this district to defend himself, but being spent in other districts to elect a little Jim Jordan army. I actually have sort of a different perception of Jordan than Mike does. I actually somehow on a flight coming back from DC, ended up sitting next to him for a while on the plane. And oh no, no, and I was just like, that's when I found out that he's got a tracker on me, because he inadvertently told me that. And
Wait, is this after he knew you were running?
oh well, I sat down, and he knew that he was supposed to know who I was, and so he's in the gate area. He went in the row before me, or in the group before me, and he was like, he looked over at me, and you could tell politicians have a look when they know they're supposed to know who someone is, but they don't. So then they go through a series of ways to figure out who that person is. So he was like, hi, and I'm like, hi. And so he goes and he sits, and then I realize as I'm walking down, I'm going to end up sitting next to him. And he was like, hi. And, oh, and what were you doing in DC? And I was like, well, I was at fundraisers. I'm, running against you. And he goes, oh, that's right. You had that thing last night. That thing last night was at friends of mine house, and it was not publicized. So there's someone, watching, which is fine. But then he was very docile, is the only word I can use to describe him, which was sort of a weird a bunch of what he does is show. It's a script in front of him. It's an act. It's the him that's him is much less a bulldog than a scared puppy.
Now, if I may interject with that, I have a personal experience, and I think I've told you both about this before. When I was in 8th grade, we were getting ready to go to DC, and so we're like, let's bring our congressperson in. And I had never, this is when I was really getting started involved in politics or the Hillary campaign stuff. Jim Jordan was not on my radar, and he came in. I was like, you know what, I'll give the guy a chance. I like some Republicans, like Lisa Murkowski, I'll give him a chance. And he just was supposed to talk about the Constitution, how it related to being a congressman and his job. Whole time it was Trump, Hillary's emails, Butter emails, Benghazi, and he's just going off like this. But then you see him talking to students, and he's not, so I see what you are both saying with that. Anyways, I just thought that was very interesting. But to our next question, and this kind of ties in with what we just talked about the gerrymandering. And it's going to go to you, to Mike first. Our district is one of the most gerrymandered districts in the United States. How can you win in a district where Democrats have a record of losing and Jim Jordan has easily won time and time again?
Yeah, well, it goes back to the last question. The way we win is we were splitting the vote 3 ways this time, the biggest change. But also, you win by showing competence and a clear contrast from the other 2 people running. I have accomplished more in my life than Jim Jordan or Chris Gibbs. And the fact that Jim Jordan represents a district that is largely agricultural, and he somehow found a way to piss off a Republican farmer, just shows you how lost he is. He's the only Republican incumbent not to get the endorsement of his local farm bureau last time around. There is serious dislike for this man here, not among progressives, we all think he's a jerk, but among right-wing Republicans like Chris Gibbs, which is why he's running. And that provides us with this incredible opportunity. And like I say, my experience of working in progressive politics my entire life, working on dozens of campaigns, advising senators and members of Congress on how to debate, how to have conversations, how to take your argument to the other candidate and do it all while staying in the 90 seconds you're allotted, is a talent that doesn't come easy for a lot of people.
Thank you. So Shannon, the same question to you.
Well, I think that there's several things. That the gerrymandering has angered a lot of people. Sort of a mix of things that have angered our district. Gerrymandering, Jordan's behavior. One of the key things that I get is a lot of people outside the district make fun of his refusing to wear a jacket. But within the district, conservative Republicans find that offensive. They find it utterly disrespectful to them and to the power that they have instilled in him to represent them. It is not a comical thing to them. It is an absolute sign of disrespect. And that's just one of the things. But him not showing up to events and him not showing up to Republican events, not even our events, our moderate events, but blowing off the County Chamber of Commerce. He was supposed to be their breakfast speaker and he blew it off. blowing off the Republicans' keynote dinner speech. Those things are angering people here, and he's not spending money here. He's desperate right now, so he's doing phone town halls where he'll call at like 6 p.m. His office will call and they'll be like, if you stay on the phone, you can be part of his town hall, which are complete campaign events. Every person on the call that I was on was like, oh my God, you walk on water, you're the most amazing thing in the world. So he's pulling a lot of Trump tricks, but he's having to do that because he's scared. He knows that there's a fight. He knows that he's at risk in a way that I don't think most of Washington and most of the quote unquote political world has figured out yet.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to touch on, so obviously we've talked about how this debate is being hosted by the Marysville High School Young Democrats. We started that this year, and me and two friends, we did, and we had our first meeting scheduled. We're gonna have David Pepper come out, Bill Steele, the county chairman, all this set up, cookies, punch, whatever you want to call it. And of course, coronavirus happened, so that got canceled. So our first thing in action was like, let's get the three candidates, let's do a debate and everything. So obviously, when you're setting up a club, you have a lot that's going into it. And, the other day we set up our Twitter account, which you both were so generous to tweet about and give awareness. But as you can imagine, we got our backlash. You have a whole majority in this county and in this town, and you have little people that aren't doing anything to call out or provoke your majority, but you feel so insecure you have to attack. And I had people that had been friends before that had dropped me because of stuff like this and everything. So when we were doing our mission statement, it was one thing that we wanted to be inclusive and, be kind and everything, whereas we are obviously not faced with the same thing. So our next question will start with Shannon, and it goes as this. The MHS Young Democrats mission statement states that the Marysville High School Young Democrats support the equality of all people, no matter their gender, age, race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, sexual identity, or orientation. The goal of the MHS Young Dems is to provide a voice for people who lean left, are liberal-minded, or have democratic views in a community where this group is not traditionally represented. How can you not only represent those who agree with you, but everyone who lives in and makes up this district?
Well, I think that as I said earlier, I'm very proud of you. I graduated from Worthington High School, which is, a few miles away. And it was very similar, very Republican. I was literally one of like, I think 5 Democrats in my school. But now they have a Democratic representative. One of the people from my high school who is in my graduating class is now a state rep for that district, Dr. Beth Liston. And so change does happen, but this is how it happens. It happens by a couple of people saying, you know what, I'm going to be public about who I am. A friend of mine who I adore, her name's Candy Yoakum, and Candy she lives in Crawford County, she lives in Bucyrus, and she was working in doing with the aged community, and she hated the fact that the Republicans in her county and her city were not helping out at all, and they were doing all these things. So Candy decided to run for office. She's like, look, I'm going to lose. I know that. And I am going to, but at least they're going to hear my voice. They're going to hear my opinion on these things. Filing deadline day came and went. Candy was the only person to run in her district, to run in her district. Candy ran unopposed and now sits on the Bucyrus City Council as a Democrat. It is okay to stand up and say, this is what I believe. And sometimes it's hard, but it is okay to do that. And that's how change happens. That's how you make change happen. And one of the key things that I really liked about your mission statement is it is broad-based, and it does encompass everyone. And I know from having, all of my nieces go to Marysville, how hard that is in a district like this, and having gone through it myself. It's easy if you grow up in a place where everyone's progressive. It's easy to be progressive. It is much, much harder to be progressive in an area like this or like Worthington, because you are fighting against the stream. So thank you for this. Thank you to all the people who will follow behind you. You are leading by example, and that is wonderful.
That's greatly appreciated. I mean, it is definitely difficult, especially when it's like, that's what you're known for. You know what I mean? I've always been into history, presidents, and then it turned into me getting politically active. So it's like that's what I've been known for. So Mike, the same question to you.
Well, first off, Chandler, if you're not pissing off Republicans, you're doing it wrong. All right. I mean, that's the whole point. Politics is a combative thing. We are supposed to show our differences from people we are running against or opposing in different parties. So by all means, let the trolls come. I mean, Shannon will tell you every time we put something on social media, you get more trolls than you do supporters, and that's okay. It means you struck a chord and you're doing something right. I was very fortunate to have some incredible internships when I was in college, and internships are important, and I hope you get to do some when you were in college. So my very first internship when I was a freshman at San Francisco State was on a campaign run out of Harvey Milk's office, the very first openly gay elected official in a major American city. And Harvey went on later that very same month after we won to be assassinated. But then after that, my second internship was for Congressman Tom Lantos, who was the very first Holocaust survivor to ever be elected to Congress. So these are people that set the bar pretty high for me. But what they most set was that the idea that diversity is not a box you check. Diversity actually really does make us stronger. You know, having a straight Catholic kid work for this famous gay man or for this Holocaust survivor helped everyone. Certainly helped me, but it made the whole process better for everyone.
Thank you. And I can just pull from that with the diversity thing, because growing up with my sister being a lesbian and everything just kind of opened my mind. And then within the past year, she came out as trans. So it's just like growing up with the diversity has made that a lot easier and able to accept. And also like having strong women influences in my life has made it easy to support women for president when I support Kamala Harris and then she dropped out, and I support Elizabeth Warren and and I support Hillary Clinton and Janet Garrett and so on and so forth. So I think that, like you said, diversity does make us stronger. Now I want to pull back to the primary with this next question, and we're going to start with Shannon. But we're going to go to the presidential primary. So obviously this question was written before Sanders dropped out, but I'd still like to address it.
The Avengers assembled.
But so each of you has made a case for why you're the strongest Democrat to take on Jim Jordan, but on the national scale, who's the best Democrat to take on President Trump and why?
Well, I think that the Democratic voters have spoken, and it's Joe Biden for the vast majority of Democratic voters. And, now that the entire group of his rivals have come together, Elizabeth Warren came today and endorsed him today, every day we're getting stronger. Because there is, Democrats have always had this image of being a disarray and we fight amongst ourselves. And, there's joke. I was watching the first season of The West Wing last night, and there was a line in there in the first episode about, he's like, it's hard to get groups of people together. And Leo McGarry says, I know, I'm a member of the Democratic Party. It's true, but we're in a place where there is such an existential threat to everything we believe in, be it climate change, be it women's rights, be it, LGBTQ rights, be it basic income, be it life, health, all of those things. There's an existential threat, and it is the Republican Party at this point. Because even the ones who weren't like this before are bowing to him, and they are allowing it to happen. Not a single Republican came out publicly and said, when he was like, yeah, I can just tell the governors and they're going to listen to me. Not a single Republican came out and said, that's not what we believe. Where did that come from? So that's where we are all coming together as Democrats, because we know how important it is. The fights that we have tend to be about policy. They tend to be about how we accomplish a goal. They don't tend to be about how we survive. We don't tend to fight about whether or not it's okay to put people in cages. We all agree on that. We're trying to figure out what the best way to achieve immigration and bring these people into our country. But but no one is advocating for putting babies in cages or, opening the government before we've solved the pandemic. Those are the things as Democrats that are so important in this cycle.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to say before I ask you, Mike, with Joe Biden. I think that it is great that we're finally uniting, but I know that just being in progressive circles and everything, like I worked for Dennis Kucinich, I was never a Bernie bro, but I worked for Dennis, and I've, seen a lot of people that were huge Bernie supporters, and even Tulsi and like burn your bus. And, now they're coming out with, well, Biden this, and it's scary to see that, considering myself a progressive Democrat, that there's people like me that just can't, look at the basic facts of, yeah, Biden is definitely a moderate Democrat. He has worked across the aisle his whole career. But he believes in progressive things. Like if you look at his platform, out of all of the like in the history of the Democratic nominees, he has the most progressive platform of any Democrat that has run and who will be our nominee. Now, would he be as left or progressive as Bernie Sanders? You can argue no. But still, considering what we've had in the past, even Obama said in his endorsement yesterday that this has been the most progressive platform that we have seen out of a presumptive nominee. So, Mike, that same question will go to you about the Democratic primary.
Well, first off, on the Bernie thing, give them time. Their guy just left. You can be pissed for a while. That's okay. I'm glad they have the energy. Eventually, that energy will get off Twitter, hopefully, and go into the streets and knock doors. But I have no problem with that. This isn't my first campaign. I've been doing this a long time. I've worked on many, many presidential races, Senate races, and have always backed the most progressive candidate. In fact, I had an interview the other day with a guy from the Washington Post, and I said, not only have I always worked for the most progressive candidate, I don't think I have ever worked for a candidate that raised the most money. I think we've always been the grassroots campaign, the people that I work for. So I said at the beginning of this, I am a big Elizabeth Warren fan. I got to work with her when I worked for Congresswoman Speer, before she was a senator, when we were working on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So I love her. I thought she was fantastic. I was endorsed by Bernie's healthcare organization, even though I've never endorsed Bernie. In fact, I think I'm their only endorsement of someone who was not a Bernie guy. So I appreciate that. But I said from the get-go, whoever wins the primary, I am behind 100%. And yeah, Joe Biden is not as progressive as someone else, but you know what? Whoever's president there is going to be dealing with this Congress. And even if we win the Senate, it's not going to be by some veto-proof majority. So whoever the president is has to be competent and work with Congress. And my only hope now is that Joe Biden picks a vice presidential candidate that plays here in Ohio, so that they don't abandon our state like the Hillary campaign did.
That actually is funny, because our next question is about vice presidential picks. But I would just like to keep this one a little shorter, just because obviously we don't have to get too in depth about who the vice president's going to be. As you just said, and I completely agree, Tim Kaine was an awful pick for Ohio. And
I don't blame him, but
for
yeah.
a lot of, swing states. I know that the top three in Hillary's picks were Sherrod, Elizabeth, and Tim Kaine, and that one of the reasons Tim may have been picked over Sherrod is the reason that we had a Republican governor, and we still do. I think that it would have been worth it to be able to take the White House and prevent these 4 years of what we've, had. But I would just like to start with you, Mike. Who do you think, because Joe Biden has committed to having a woman as vice president, that he should select, and why? Just like 30 seconds.
All right, can I throw out 4 names?
Sure.
I can't even know names. I mean, I love Kamala Harris. I love Stacey Abrams. I would throw my old boss, Jackie Speer, in the mix. And for my wild card, Oprah Winfrey.
Okay. Shannon, same to you.
I think it's got to be someone in a state that we're not going to lose, which is, so Elizabeth Warren will keep Massachusetts. Kamala Harris will keep California. But we need to look at governors. We need to look at people who Joe Biden understands how Congress works better than 99.999% of the population. He knows how to pass legislation. We need someone, so I mean, Gretchen Whitmer is a great choice. Mm-hmm. Someone like that who's got the executive governing experience. Biden has it for being vice president, but someone of that caliber as well, I think that we need to be looking at.
Okay. I would just like to say, both of you know me pretty well, and you both know I was a big Kamala person. That's who I really think that we should pick, because not only does she bring diversity to the ticket, being, an Indian American, Black American. She also has that just age divide. She represents a younger group of people. And I think she just brings a lot to the ticket where Joe Biden doesn't. A lot of Biden people have been floating recently that apparently Amy Klobuchar is the front runner for the VP right now, which I love Amy. She's a great worker bee. She gets things passed. But I feel like when you put someone on the ticket that really can't excite people and that won't, I just think that's a very bad choice, but that's just my personal opinion. So this next section of the forum is going to focus on you two individually, and I just have 2 questions each. So Shannon, this first question's to you, and it's about your experience as a woman.
Okay.
It's obviously. How does it feel to see the most diverse field of presidential candidates in history narrowed down to 2 old white men, well now 1, when you're currently the only female running to represent our district in DC, when these experiences may be comparable? No offense, Mike.
Oh, I'm not a woman. I've come to grips with that.
Our party, the backbone of our party are Black women. They just are. That's just reality.
So Jones.
Americans are our party, but Black women especially are the nuts and bolts. And they, by and large, chose Joe Biden. And if that's who they chose, then I trust their judgment on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, Biden in this time period, unlike almost any other time in American history, we need to rebuild where we were. And we need people who have, the experience and the depth and the nuts and bolts. So I get why it was Biden for this period of time. But I don't think that minimizes or, somehow makes it less that we should be honoring the fact that we had, African-American men, an African-American man, African-American women. We had LGBTQ people. We have a huge diversity, and that showed in our primary. But we chose the person who the majority of Democrats decided that that's the one that they wanted to win. And that's fine. But that's how the system works. And for me, I want to be judged on all of the parts of me. And part of that is being a woman. And I have a different view as a woman than the guys on my right, that I'm running against. And that's nothing to negative about them. It's just how you view things. And so I don't think that it should be necessarily a positive or a negative. It's just a difference.
Okay, so Mike, this next question is just for you.
Okay.
You claim to be the most progressive Democrat in this race and the real Democrat running for the nomination. What makes you the most progressive candidate in your view?
My long commitment to progressive politics, I don't define Democrat as the ballot you choose on primary day. I define being a Democrat in working tirelessly over the years for Democratic candidates, for progressive candidates. Shannon and Jeff didn't even help Janet Garrett last time around. Now, Shannon wasn't in the district, but Jeff has been here. And, there's no reason a Democrat doesn't at the very least step up for the Democrat running for Congress. How do you even call yourself a Democrat that way? I have worked for Democrats my whole life, and primarily for strong women Democrats. I mentioned who I interned for, Harvey Milk and Tom Lantos. Those choices matter, and not all women in politics are the same. Shannon chose to intern for Kellyanne Conway at the time that Kellyanne Conway was leading Newt Gingrich's campaign to take over the House of Representatives. Now, that was a choice a college-educated young woman who was very skilled in policy chose for herself, okay? I made different choices. I don't think being a progressive means just checking the box and saying, I'm for healthcare, I'm for women, I don't want to put kids in cages. It is a lifetime of commitment that can be measured, that you can actually go back and do the research and see that one of us was on the front lines all these years, and 2 of us were not on the front lines. I welcome them to the cause, but I've been here my entire adult life.
Okay, thank you. Now, Shannon, since you were mentioned, I'm going to give you a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, that's fine. Mike loves this argument. It's not true. I was in college. Kellyanne was not Kellyanne Conway. She was Kellyanne Fitzpatrick. She was a pollster. She was in love with my college. She wasn't this monster that she has become. And I was curious. I wanted to understand how the other side of politics worked. let me tell you, that's a benefit in this race. I understand the mindset in a way that no one else running in the Democratic primary does. And so that's a benefit to how I can communicate with people. But the most important thing is, and Mike likes to talk about people that he worked for. I spent my freshman year in college interning for Senator Kennedy when he was doing healthcare reform, the Hillary bill, when he was passing the idea of reauthorization, when he was passing the elementary and secondary education, when he was doing the first student loan bill, all of those things. I had a front row seat, well, second row because I sat behind him, watching and learning how legislation worked. And those are the things that I bring. But, and I also don't know that there's any real benefit to attacking the other people in this race. I don't believe that we should be. I mean, we've all agreed by the end of this that we're going to support the one who wins, because it is an existential threat much bigger than any of our egos should be. And so I think that's where we should all be right now.
Thank you. Let's leave the horse lie, and let's move on. So Mike, this next question is your second question. So of the three candidates running, you're the only candidate that was not born and raised in Ohio, right? You were born in California. Right. Yeah. So I want to know, what made you decide to make Ohio your home and why you wanted to run for office here?
Yeah, I like to say I am an Ohioan by choice. I live in Ohio because I had the good sense of marrying a woman from Ohio. That's why we moved here. I moved here for my family. Both my wife and I met in the entertainment industry and both had really great careers in the entertainment industry, but it was always our goal that at some point we would leave with what we've earned and go back to Ohio to raise our family. And it's the best move I've ever made. I love living here in Ohio. But more important than not being born and raised in Ohio is being born and raised in the progressive movement. And Shannon, it is not attacking to point out the thing that you have on your website. You were very proud of working for Kellyanne Conway, and you even called her Kellyanne Conway, not Kellyanne Fitzpatrick, and she was helping Newt Gingrich with his contract for America at the time, and she was going on talk shows with Laura Ingraham and Ann Coulter at the time, and you're a brilliant, well-educated woman. You knew all of that. So it's not an attack, and I will support Shannon if she wins. Shannon probably will win. She's raised more money than the rest of us, and money talks in politics. And I will gladly vote for Shannon if she gets the nomination, but there is nothing wrong. It's the same thing I said about the Bernie people. Let people point out their differences with other candidates. It's not the end of the world.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when you're in college, you're supposed to be exploring things and you're supposed to be learning new things. And you're not supposed to be so ideologically centered, you can't look and find out what other people believe and agree. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And I'm proud of the fact that I looked at something and said, okay, this person is a young woman who disagrees with everything I agree with, or we disagree on everything. But I'm curious about what makes that ideology work. And that's what I did for a semester in college. That's what you're supposed to do when you're in college. You're supposed to do that, Chandler, when you go to college. You're supposed to learn new things and broaden your horizons. And one of the things that experience did is it cemented what I believe. I was like 20 years old, and it cemented what I believed because I fought for what I believed every single day. I argued for what was important to me every single day. And that's what's really important.
Okay, thank you. So this is the last personal question before we go back to questions for both of you guys. So okay. Shannon, and I know that being a woman, that obviously it is constantly addressed in the campaign, so I'm sorry that this has
it's okay.
You are a woman, but
it's constantly addressed every day, everywhere. Being a woman is a whole experience in and of itself.
So how has running for office been as a woman, and what are the advantages and disadvantages you face?
I think for the first time in history, being a woman in Democratic politics is an advantage. People like seeing women lead because we're finding out that there's academic research that says women make better legislators. And it's because we're trained to compromise. We're trained to make sure that everybody gets something that they want in a way that we take our egos out of it to make sure that everyone gets some portion. And so I think that, you see people like Nancy Pelosi, who also is an alum of my college. Kellyanne and Nancy are both alums of my college. I call them the twin pillars of good and evil. But, you know, those are the things that we see every day. And the more that you see women, the more that young women see women leading, they believe that they have a right to that part of government, to that part of leadership, that they are allowed to lead. You know, for me, that was Hillary Clinton. When I was 17, the only time I skipped school in my entire career was I was a senior in high school, and I skipped school to see Hillary a couple days after she said, "I'm not staying home to bake cookies." And I had a sign that said, "I'm not staying home to bake cookies either." And it was actually really cute because she saw the sign and she leaned over and she was like, "Honey, I actually really like baking cookies. I just didn't think it should be my career choice." For me, that was a defining moment in my political understanding, and my life understanding, that I didn't have to choose. Women had been raised at that point, and young girls had been raised that if you wanted a career and you wanted to be a feminist, you also had to be a perfect mother. They were called superwomen or super moms, and you had to have both. And Hillary was the first person to say, you can choose, pick one. You know, sometimes being at home with their kids is boring. And there are a lot of women and men who are finding that out right now as they're, you know, at home with their kids all day. It's hard to be a full-time at-home parent.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, but, you know, I've been around enough kids. I've got 4 nieces and a bunch of cousins who are younger than me. So those are the things that being a woman sort of bring to the table, but I don't think it defines everything about me.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to go back to general questions for both of you. So Mike, we're going to start with you. Since being in Congress, Representative Jim Jordan has not passed any legislation. Obviously, as a Congress member, you should be passing legislation. So what legislation would you hope to pass, and how would you implement it?
Yes, and to point out that most of the time Jim Jordan has been in Congress, it's been in a Republican House where he actually could get his legislation passed. And I've often said, even if he only worked on the thing I hate the most, he only worked on repealing Roe versus Wade or whatever, at least I'd give him some props for pushing an issue. But yes, there are a couple things that we must deal with absolutely as a species. And the first is the climate crisis. And this pandemic comes from that. You know, back in the 70s, when they first started talking about global warming, they warned about these superbugs. And I don't think we talk about that enough. So I think we definitely have to start focusing on the climate crisis in a whole country way, like we did when we developed a nuclear weapon during World War II. We put the full power of the United States on it. The second thing we have to do is make sure our elections have integrity. We need to go to a national mail by ballot or ballot by mail process, and also federalize federal elections so that we vote for Congress in Ohio the same way they do in Hawaii or Kentucky. Right now, elections are run by county office holders, and it allows them to cook the books too much. And then, of course, healthcare we will be working on for the rest of our lives and our grandchildren's lives. It is a yearly battle, but we have to keep the battle because there will always be the Jim Jordans of the world who are trying to blow it up.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, same question to you.
I think that the first thing that we need to do is the reason when Nancy Pelosi brought in this new Congress, the first thing that she had is a bill called H.R. 1, which is basically it's election security and protecting the integrity of our elections, in that we restore the Voting Rights Act. We make sure that we repeal Citizens United. We monitor dark money and all of those things. And we, protect vote by mail and those things. So those are the key things, because there's nothing else we're going to do until we protect our elections. If elections can be rigged, if, voter intimidation or forcing people to stand outside when they're risking their lives, they'll do it because that's how important voting becomes to them. God love the people of Wisconsin who were like, okay, I'll risk my life, but we're not putting that dude on the Supreme Court anymore. Those are the things that matter the most. Protecting the integrity of our elections is first and foremost, because no policy will happen beyond that. We also, though, need to make sure that we're protecting our people, that we're protecting, the LGBTQ community, that we're protecting women, that we're passing the Violence Against Women Act, we're restoring the Violence Against Women Act, that we're making sure that our immigration system is actually functioning so that people aren't in cages, so we're not ripping families apart. All of those things matter. So the most important things to me are making sure that our elections are safer, more controlled, more organized, more transparent, and making sure that our people are more protected.
Okay, thank you. So these next two questions are going to be 30 seconds each. They're just shorter response. So this next one goes to Mike. Just in a quick couple words, how would you make a better congressperson than our current representative, Jim Jordan?
I'm not Jim Jordan. No, but honestly, I work for the gold standard of congressperson. She holds town hall meetings every month. She also is in a safe district, a Democratic district, but she doesn't care. And that's the most important thing. I'll be responsive. I'll hold town hall meetings every month in every community, even while acknowledging that there are probably more people in this district who would disagree with me than agree with me, but they have every right to come yell at their congressperson.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, same question to you.
I won't hold legislation hostage that is important to people's lives. And that's what we have a congressman who does that now. We have a congressman who looked at the COVID funding and was like, nope, they don't need it. So that's, I think, the key thing is making sure that our district actually has someone fighting for them.
Okay, thank you. So this next question, and you both have touched on it a little bit, but just as a confirmation, will you support and endorse the eventual Democratic nominee in order to unite our party and to defeat Jim Jordan? Shannon, you can start.
Absolutely. I mean, who else would you support? I mean, there's you know, I mean, we're in a time where it can't be, you can't play games. You can't be like, oh, well, I'll vote third party or I'm not going to vote because I didn't get my person. There's a threat to our country and our world. You're going to vote for, you know, I absolutely will vote for Joe Biden.
Oh, I meant in our congressional.
Me.
Oh, no, we've already talked about that. Sorry.
No.
Okay.
I will, yeah, no, absolutely. Understand, we've already made that agreement.
Yes, we have.
I got distracted. We made that agreement long ago. We will support the eventual nominee.
It seems like that's a yes.
And understand, Jeff has agreed to those terms as well. I know he's not here, but he has agreed to those terms as well. So I want everyone to know that as well.
Chandler, if I could just say, yes, I will support whoever wins this nomination. And beyond that, I will also help make them a better candidate by asking tough questions of the people I run against. And if you can't stand the heat from a fellow Democrat who's going to support you, imagine what happens when you face Jim Jordan and Trump's angry tweets and all that firestorm of nonsense. So absolutely, I will happily be, in fact, the minute we know who the winner is, I will get up on social media and congratulate Shannon or Jeff and say, I'm in, so.
Okay, so this is our final
Same,
question.
absolutely the same. I don't know what we're gonna find out though, because
It could be weeks from now.
I mean,
You're right.
So for our final question, we're going to go back to our standard of 1.5 minutes, and we're going to start with Mike. So for our final question, we're going to address the youth, since obviously this is being hosted by Young Democrats. Young people like myself, who may not be able to vote this year, are concerned about what has become of our country under the Trump administration and our district with Congressman Jim Jordan. What advice do you have to offer to young supporters and activists who may be losing hope in our democratic process?
Speak up. Don't wait for someone to tell you you should do something. I volunteered for my first campaign when I was 12 years old. I was a young Democrat. And there are too many people that want to tell young people or people in the arts or in sports or whatever to shut up. You know, shut up and dribble. You don't have a voice because you're not whatever they think America is. So speak up. Like I said before, if you're not pissing off Republicans, you're doing it wrong. Stand up and be counted. And you know what happens when you do? Other people who were quiet come forward and say, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. So don't be afraid to speak your mind. But also don't get caught up in what the pundits say. You know, you mentioned earlier, Chandler, that, you know, the pundits say Amy Klobuchar. The pundits are always wrong. Okay, they told us Trump didn't have a chance and Hillary was the shoo-in. So trust yourself and your community and your friends more than the pundits, and just keep fighting. Find a campaign, volunteer, and just keep speaking up for yourself.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, same question to you.
register to vote. At 17, you can register to vote. You can early register to vote. absolutely register to vote and vote in every election. The local elections, the local primaries, the big, presidential years, people get excited about. But those local elections matter a hell of a lot more to your life than does the presidency. 99% of the time. Like right now, it's kind of different than you can at 17 in Ohio. You can vote in a primary if you'll be 18 by the time that the general happens. I at 17 voted in my first primary. These are things that you can do, and they are the most important things that you can do. But you can also run for office. You're not tied to having to wait until you're a grown-up to run for office. A guy in Marion who's just up the road 20 minutes named Kai Mead got angry because nobody in Marion was taking the youth seriously and making any policies towards building a future for Marion. And he got angry and he decided to run, and Kai won by 1 vote. He knocked on every door in that district, every possible opportunity he had to connect with a voter, he did it. And he won by 1 vote. He now sits on the city council. Now he's 22. There's now a 22-year-old who's sitting on the city council. You don't have to wait until you get some mythical grown-up age to be a part. So work on campaigns, but vote. And if you feel it, run. There's an enormous amount of groups that will allow you and give you the guidance to run. There's Run for Something. There's, if you're a Democratic woman and you're pro-choice, you can, go to Emily's List. There are the Democratic National Training Program. There are ways that you can be a candidate as well, or you can be a volunteer. These things are how you get involved, especially if this is what you want to do with your life.
Thank you. I would just like to say, when I address the young people like myself, everyone's always like, oh, Chandler, you're 17, you should register to vote, this. And trust me, I really want to. My birthday is November 18th, sorry. I barely it, and it's just.
There's an election in 2021 you need to be registered for.
I know, but I don't think people really do realize how important local elections are, because in order to have real change, you need to start from your city council, your Union County commissioners. Like last election in 2018, we had our first Union County commissioner Democratic candidate in 25 years. And she got 47% of the vote, which is really good. And now she's running for state rep, and I wish her the best and everything. But I think people need to start realizing, especially young people, that if you just would spend some time with these local campaigns, we'll eventually get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we're going to wrap up with our conclusions, and you're each going to have 2 minutes. We're going to start like we did in the beginning. So Shannon, you get the first conclusion.
Okay. I want to thank you, and I want to thank your teacher, and I want to thank that the 3 of you, or however many there are in the Marysville High School Young Dems. I am, as I said earlier, I'm exceptionally proud. I am so sorry for the seniors who have had their senior year destroyed, who will probably not get commencement, who will miss prom and all of those rites of passage. My heart breaks for you. My heart breaks for the families who are suffering losses and who are scared to death that family members are going to get sick. And those are the things that are at stake in this election. And I know sometimes politics seems like a game, and it seems like a trite pastime and a hobby, but you're seeing why it matters who you elect. Elections have consequences, and those are the key things that we need to stress all the time. It made a real difference if Hillary Clinton had been elected versus Donald Trump. That's just a statement of fact. So the fact that you're willing to stand up and you're willing to take these steps, I am so proud of you. I am so excited for you, and I am here for whatever you need.
Okay, thank you. Mike, your conclusion.
Yeah, I want to thank, Young Dems and Chandler and Mr. Scherer. Thanks for putting this together. I also want to thank Shannon and Jeff. Like I say, we kind of had this rock tour up until they made us stay in our houses. We were going all over the district and engaging, and it was great. I think it's a good way for people to judge us, and I appreciated it, and I look forward for us all to be working together in November. So I got into this race originally because I was dissatisfied with the way Democrats often ran in the 4th Congressional District. I felt too often there were Democrats, good people, but Democrats who, once they got into these more conservative counties, started acting like they were half a Republican and pulling back on the things that were important to them. Didn't talk about the importance of fully funding Planned Parenthood. Didn't talk about having to get battlefield weapons off our streets and out of our schools. Rights for the LGBTQ community. It goes on and on and on. And in the last race 2 years ago, I actually mentioned to the state party chair, I said, wouldn't it be great to see someone actually run as a progressive Democrat on a lifelong experience of being a progressive Democrat? And so this time around, I decided to put my money where my mouth is and do it. And I have enjoyed myself in this campaign. I've met so many people who've come up to me out of the woodwork and said they are so happy to finally see someone running on progressive values. I think that's the way we win in November. And I want everyone to join me. First, join me literally every night at 8 o'clock. I do a Facebook Live event. It goes for about 45 minutes. I interview people. We talk about the issues of the day. You can send your questions in. You can access that at Larson for Congress. You can also go to my website, ohiomike2020.com, and find out more about us. Once again, thank you, everybody. This was awesome.
Okay, thank you. And I'd just like to wrap it up saying thank you to both of you for joining us today. And thanks to Jeff, who has obviously... Yeah, thanks, Jeff, if you're watching. But thanks for fighting a well campaign and keeping it civil and all wanting to support the Democratic nominee no matter which of you three wins. And we'll be lucky to have any of you three as a nominee. Thank you for coming to compare, contrast your ideas and visions for our district. It is now left in our hands, the residents and constituents of the Ohio 4th Congressional District, to pick the best candidate to face off with Jim Jordan in November. Please consider what you've learned about these candidates and vote your conscience. Your vote counts. Please vote in the Ohio primary, now taking place on April 28th by absentee ballot. To request your absentee ballot, call your local Board of Elections. And also, as Shannon had touched on earlier, make sure you are paying attention to when you need to have it mailed out and everything.
The 27th. It must be postmarked by the 27th.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you really take to heart what these candidates have talked about today. I'm Chandler White, and it's been an honor to moderate this debate. So thank you.
Thank you, Chandler, so much.